go. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We have a very special guest everybody knows and loves, our very own Rabbi Yochanan from right here in Chicago, who has been a practicing sofer for numerous decades, providing the community with Tefilin and Mezuzas. And this time of year, it's in this month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, we're all doing some personal introspection, doing some self-analysis, reviewing the year that's passed. And one of the very particular and recommended mechanisms for doing that, and I have an appointment myself for this Thursday, is to get our own personal tefillin and mezuzahs checked. So I asked Rabbi Yochanan, and he very graciously agreed to spend some time with us and speak to us about this idea. So Rabbi Yochanan, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we're happy to have you. So let's begin with the beginning. So why is it necessary? A person buys a pair of tefillin, they buy a mezuzah, they didn't drop it, they didn't break it, they didn't drop it in a puddle. What is the significance of having it checked, and how often should a person have it checked? And some of your experiences about what happens when people bring you their tefillin, mezuzahs, and Torahs to be checked.
Well, good evening, everybody. The reason that you need to check tefillin and mezuzahs basically is because what's called human error. There's a lot of things that could go wrong with tefillin, even if you bought them, from a reputable place. There's things that could be a problem to begin with. And if you didn't buy them from a really reputable place, they could be that they were never kosher to begin with. So there's a lot of reasons for checking tefillin. There are different customs regarding this. The Bavitcher Rebbe used to advertise that our custom is to do it every year, around Elul time, if not, but others have a custom every 3.5 years to check tefillin and mezuzahs. The actual strict law for tefillin is if they were kosher and you knew they were kosher, nothing happened to them, you don't even have to check them. But we do check them nowadays because the materials are not always so good. Things break down, the straps. There's a lot that could go wrong with it. So where do you want to start?
No, you tell us. Let's just maybe walk us through a step. So somebody brings you their mezuzahs from home. What does the process look like? What is it that you're really looking for? And if you can share, obviously without anybody's name, even some sort of story that illustrates what could happen and does happen with the mezuzahs that appear, to be fine. Looks good to me. So
okay,
walk us through that step.
Usually I get a mezuzah that comes in a cover, something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this would be a 10 centimeter mezuzah. We call it. There's some come bigger, some come smaller. What I do is I fish it out of the cover and I open it up. Here I have it in the plastic. You can see that it's plastic. I would then open it up and I would lay it down flat on the table. I don't know if you can see there. Maybe here. Let's see. Anyhow, I would put it down flat on the table, and I would check it over from the beginning until the end, and to see if all the letters are there, if they're all complete. No letter has been written incorrectly. No letter has been erased along the way, because it's as you fold it up, or rather roll it up, it's only parchment with ink on it that the ink could easily become detached from the parchment. So those are the kind of things which I'm looking for. Normally, if you have a mezuzah that was bought from a reputable place, so then usually if nothing would go wrong with it if they're inside. Mezuzahs which are exposed to the elements can get water damage. They can be the sun can damage them by beating down on them, and sometimes I've even seen mezuzahs turn into mush. Mm-hmm. Absolute mush. Which is quite upsetting when you see that happen. But most of the time, if you have good mezuzahs, they remain good for years and years. They come in different sizes, as I mentioned. Here is a small mezuzah. This is a 7 centimeter mezuzah. I buy them in packs, such as you can see here, a whole package of them. Like I buy about 100 at a time, and then I don't trust the previous checking. Most of the time, they haven't done a real good job. They just nowadays they computer check it, but I check each one by hand to make sure that at least it passes my inspection. And and then once that's done, you roll them up in the right way, like this. You kind of roll it up and put it back into one of these. You put it into plastic and put it into the cover in the right way. Now, things that could happen is you'll be surprised with mezuzahs. Sometimes you could take a mezuzah off your door, and lo and behold, there's nothing inside it.
Oops.
Because that happens quite often, especially if you have multiple doors. Sometimes you kind of miscalculate and you get a mezuzah cover up without a mezuzah inside of it, which would be a big problem.
You think approximately how long does it take you if a mezuzah is basically kosher? How long does it take you to check one mezuzah?
Well, depending on how well it's written and what condition it's in, it could take anything from 5 minutes to half an hour, depending on what to be done.
And is there any way to fix a mezuzah? Somebody's talking. We gotta mute them. There we go. Is there some way to fix a mezuzah that's got problems, or is it a yes/no kind of thing?
There are ways to fix it. The thing that has to be understood with regards to a mezuzah is that each letter has to be written in a chronological order from the beginning to the end. And that makes a problem if a letter goes bad, because it depends on how bad it is. If it changes its shape, or God forbid, if a letter was missed out or something like that, then it can change the whole concept of the order when you rewrite that letter. Because obviously that letter that you're now correcting was written out of order. So that's why a mezuzah cannot, if it's very bad, it can't be changed. It can't be fixed, and you have to change the mezuzah. Many times it's just a little crack in the letter, or there's a point missing from the letter, and it doesn't disqualify the letters themselves, because you could still read them properly, and so therefore you could correct them. Most times, if people have good mezuzahs, they're usually correctable. Unless something, as I mentioned before, you get bad water damage, or the sun beats down on it and the letters dry out and pop off the cloth, or the cloth itself gets ruined somehow. But most of the time you can do that.
So let's switch now to tefillin. So now somebody brings you their tefillin and they say, will you check them for me? Walk us through a little bit of that process. I imagine it's a little more complicated.
Well, yeah, technically, I have here some tefillin. These were just brought to me. It doesn't come with this little red thing on it. Okay. A person brought me these tefillin. There's some problems in the family. They have some, I think the father's not doing well. Right away, I told the person that it wasn't good because I could see that the stitching on the top over here wasn't square. Even though the tefillin themselves look good, the stitching wasn't done properly. So that's enough to disqualify it. The tefillin have to be square on the top, around the bottom here, around the bottom here, on the bottom here, the stitching on the bottom, the stitching on the top here, everything has to be square. So that's one of the things that we look at. It does, to be square, you have to look at it like this technically and see if it's square. You don't have to measure it with a caliper. But that's the first thing you do. You look at it there. If the tefillin have lost their paint, that doesn't make it unkosher, because tefillin could be white. The straps have to be black. Okay, so the first thing I looked at with this particular person was I looked at these tefillin. I knew the stitches were a problem to begin with. Then when I opened it up, you can see in the bottom here that there are 4 holes. Each one of those holes takes a parchment. In this particular case, I have this parchment is the last parchment. Now, I don't know if you could see, but over here, where's a gun? Over here, right where my finger is, right over here, There's a
Lift it
hole
up a little higher. Lift it up a little higher.
right over
Okay.
here. There's a hole
Yeah, between the lamed and the chaf.
that breaks the lamed and the chaf over there. So anyhow, this one was crammed inside one of the boxes, and when I took it out, I discovered this hole. So now I'm not sure when the hole came. When did the hole come? When it was put in, or did it come when it was taken out? It was very hard to get it out. But that's a problem that could quite often occur. Here's a tefillin for the arm. You see, it's 4 sections: 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, those are the 4 sections in the Torah where the mitzvah of tefillin is mentioned. For the one for the arm, it's all on one long roll like this, and each parchment, each particular section has to be checked over, make sure that it's 100% kosher. It also, not parenthetically, it also has to be written in order. From the very beginning, the very first letter to the very last letter has to be written in order. So if you get a problem with a letter like we had over here, this particular section now is no good. This has to be replaced. Okay? But since this is the last of the parchments, you only have to replace the last one for the head, because the other 3 are still okay.
So in the head tefillin, even though it's 4 separate pieces of parchment, they still also have to be written in sequence.
It has to be written in sequence. It's the exact same part, the same sections of the Torah. So that's one of the things that we find. Sometimes you see that the stitches have come loose or broken. That could be a problem. When you open up the parchment, sometimes you'll notice that they don't have these hairs on them. This is the hairs from the tail of a cow that has to wrap around the parchments. So
that's in the head or the hand tefillin?
Both of them.
Both of them. Okay.
Every parchment has to be wrapped in those hairs, wrapped with another piece of actual unwritten parchment, and then wrapped again with these hairs. And many times the hairs have come off, and it wasn't well done to begin with. So you got to make sure it's all in good shape.
Now the stitching in the boxes that you showed us, what is that made from?
Okay, here I have a thread. You can see this thread. Here's a long roll of it. Okay, this is made from animal ligaments.
Oh boy!
And when you close up the tefillin, you have to sew around where it has these holes. I don't know if you can see it. There are holes drilled in it, and you have to stitch so that the bottom flap closes to the top. It has to be stitched. So this is the stitching you have to use with this particular thread. You can't use just any old thread. It has to be this particular kind of stuff made from animal ligaments.
You buy that from a special Sofra supply?
I get them from the Sofra supply store.
You don't get that at Vogue Fabrics in Edmonton, I assume.
No, you can't do that. I would tell you this. You see, then there's another problem with tefillin. Here you have the straps. This would be a strap for the head in this particular case. And you can tell here, this is from that same pair of tefillin. You could see that the black part has come apart from the actual leather. This is like a plastic. I don't know exactly how they made it, but these became common in the last few years. And it often happens that it becomes separated like that. And that might be a major problem, because as far as the tefillin are concerned, the top has to be black, but if it's separated, it's no longer black. You can see that it's kind of brownish color.
And how is that color? Can you color it black, or if it becomes faded, does it have to be discarded?
No, this particular one, I'm going to tell them to change, because that plastic covering on top of it, even though that itself is kosher, once it separates from the leather, I don't believe it's kosher anymore. But technically, if the leather becomes, if the black becomes worn out, you can paint it.
And just with regular paint? Is that also a specially made paint?
It's got to be a kosher paint, because the tefillin straps have to be black according to the halacha. The tefillin themselves don't, but the top side of the straps have to be black.
So how long does it take you to check a pair? This pair of tefillin was brought to you. It's obviously got some issues and so on. How long of a job is that approximately?
Yeah, if everything is good, it's about a 2-hour job.
Oh boy.
Okay, it's about a 2-hour job if everything goes well. If tefillin, tefillin is because of all the intricate work that you have to put it all back together in the same way.
Sure.
And then, so that's what it takes, and that's what the time is.
So I can imagine at this time of year, it's a pretty busy time for a sofrim because everybody wants to get their tefillin check. So is there a way that people can make an appointment, or can they just show up, or what's the best
Yeah,
process for people?
they could call me. You probably could give my number out. If anybody wants to write it down, it's 773-510-2467. And call me and we can see if we can fit you in, whenever it is. Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to get it done before Elul, but it's not possible for one sofer to do it. So sometimes it stretches into the next few months. But nevertheless, that's how it goes. I would tell you one horror story, which
please, okay.
I have regarding tefillin. Somebody once brought me tefillin, and the strap had broken.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, it was on the shell, on the shell yard. So he just brought me the shell yard, right? The one for the arm. And I was a little busy. I told him to wait a minute. When I got to him, I picked it up in my hand and I looked at it and I said, without even opening it, I said, your tefillin are pasul. They're no good. So he said, how could that be? How do you know? I said, well, there's no stitches on it, right? So right away, I knew that there was a problem. That itself makes it pasul. Mm-hmm. And then I said to him, you better go home and bring the shell rush, because I'm pretty sure that's also pasul.
And was it intact?
And he brought it back. There was nothing inside. Empty. He was wearing it for 17 years with nothing inside. Good thing the straps broke.
Amen. Okay, so let's back up just a minute, if you don't mind sharing us. How did this become your passion? How did you decide that this is the way you were going to make the world a better place, specifically by becoming a sofer? Can you tell us a little bit of your backstory there?
Yeah, certainly. I was in yeshiva in Kfar Chabad, and I was learning a lot of Chassidut. And in Chassidus, there's a lot of discussion about otiyot, letters, which obviously it means the letters of the Torah and the way they're composed, etc. Different things, different aspects of what letters really are. So I was fascinated by that particular concept, and I decided that when I got married, that I would have to get a parnasa. I thought this would be a very good parnasa because it would keep me within the realm of kosher type of a parnasa. I wouldn't have to go out onto the street, and I would always be involved in learning and helping people do mitzvahs. So that's really what motivated me. And how
long is the process? Give us like a rough idea. Would you go to sofer school? Did you get an apprentice with a private person?
In those days, there was no sofer school. People used to do apprenticeships. I was I learned by it's not a really long apprenticeship. I learned by a man. His name is Yerachmiel Yaros. He was down the tracks from us a little bit. It took me 10 minutes on the train. I would go to his house, and he taught me how to do all the letters and all.
This is in Eretz Yisrael. You were learning from him.
In Eretz Yisrael, yeah.
Wow.
And then basically you have to learn the laws and make sure that you know them, and you have to be proficient in writing and in checking, making sure that you could know all the laws that there could be with regards to missing letters or correcting letters, and making, especially with mezuzas and tefillin, there's all those different laws regarding it. Anyhow, I thought this would be a good parnasa. I'm trying to figure it out still if I was right.
So here you are. What has it been, 40 years that you've been doing it? You're pretty good at it.
Coming in on 50 years now.
God bless. Wonderful. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan, I want to thank you so much for spending some time. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and jump in with a quick question, we do want to be respectful of his time and not keep him. But if somebody has a very quick or brief question or something that they'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, we'll say goodnight to everyone. Reminder tomorrow night.
Question?
Yeah, please.
What does Chabad think about people wearing mezuzas?
Wearing mezuzas? Well, those mezuzas that people usually wear are not really mezuzas. It's just the outside. And inside, if there's anything, it's a little piece of paper that says, "Help! I'm a prisoner in a mezuzah factory."
Ah,
Usually they don't have anything of any. They don't have a mezuzah inside because they're too small.
Mhm.
So I mean,
Just a
if a
symbol.
person was wearing it as that kind of a charm, it probably wouldn't be a problem. But we don't do that in Chabad anyhow.
Yeah.
Have you ever written a Torah scroll?
I've written 4 complete Torah scrolls.
Oh, wow. How long does that take? We didn't even talk about that. How long does that take? Give me some
Wow.
rough.
It takes me about 1,000 hours
Oh, my God.
of actual writing. But it's probably, because I'm so busy with a lot of other things, it takes me, considerably longer to finish a Torah, to find 1,000 hours, to be able to do it.
Oh, wow. 1,000 man hours to write a Torah. Beautiful. Wonderful. Anyone else have a question? Otherwise,
Yeah, I just had a
Yeah.
quick question. So
sure.
in checking the Torah scrolls, or I'm sorry, the mezuzahs, if they're not in use, do they still need to be checked? Because I have several in storage. I moved into a new apartment and I'm not using them. Should they still be checked if they're not in use?
I would suggest, yes, that if you ever want to use them again, they should be checked. As I mentioned, they can start to disintegrate over time, but I've had mezuzahs on my doors for approximately 40 years already, and whenever I check them, they seem to be in good shape. But some, they could just start to break down, spontaneously over time.
Right.
It's just quite
I guess
amazing.
I just meant like during the month of Elul, like should I get it checked even if I'm not using
No,
it now?
no,
Or
no. You only
wait
need to.
until I use it again.
Yeah, the idea is to check the mezuzahs that are kosher on your doors,
Okay.
that are on your doors, because that's where you have to do the mitzvah.
Right. Thank you.
Okay,
My
sure.
pleasure.
Anyone else
It
got a
was,
question?
no, not a question, but that was very interesting. I liked when you showed us the underneath part of it.
Good.
Okay,
Well, we
good.
always bring you the best. Don't sound surprised that it's
Okay, everybody, have a great night.
okay. Beautiful,
Okay.
wonderful. Good night, everyone. Reminder, tomorrow night I have a wedding, so